Why, hello, and welcome to the newest episode of Dino. It's been a while. As you can see, we have a new logo, courtesy of Dan and our mutual friend. Now, today, you might be wondering, Eldin, where the heck have you been? Well, if you haven't been watching Dino, you might have seen I've done some Eldin Arc episodes. If you haven't seen the Eldin Arc episodes, I recommend checking those out too. Now, with that being said, though, if you're just tuning in for the first time, what is Dino? So this show is all about dinosaurs, especially Canadian dinosaurs. So I do talk about prehistoric animals as well, but it's mostly dinosaurs. Over the last year and a bit, I've been slowly covering all the dinosaurs found in Canada from A to Z, and it's taken me a long time. I'm working my way through the S's currently, the S-named dinosaurs, and we are finally on to my all-time favorite ceratopsian, Styracosaurus. Now, get ready for a dynamite time, and let's get started. So, Styracosaurus lived anywhere between 76 to 74 million years ago. That's about 10 million years before Triceratops started walking the land. So, where was it found? And that's a great question. It was first discovered in Alberta, Canada in 1913 in what would become the Dinosaur Provincial Park by Charles M. Sternberg. We talked about him in the past. And later in the same year, it was named by Lawrence Lamb. Also talked about Lawrence Lamb in the past. So after this, there were two major expeditions to discover more of Styracosaurus. So the first trip was in 1915 by Barnum Brown. We talked about Barnum Brown before as well. And his team of Americans from the American Museum of Natural History. And they yielded a partial skull and an articulated skeleton. So, bit of a skull, articulated skeleton is most of the skeleton behind it. The second trip in 1935 was by the Royal Ontario Museum. The ROM is so cool to hear that. And they found the lower jaws and almost complete post-cranial skeleton. Now, what a post-cranial skeleton is everything after the skull. So they basically found the bottom jaws, because all we had found was the top part of the skull. We found the bottom jaws, and then we found the rest of the body. So cool. So there's been many more fossils found over the years since. But these three big discoveries really just started the hype for Styracosaurus. Now, Styracosaurus is, again, one of my favorites. And it has this little fun thing where there have been multiple subspecies/species of Styracosaurus named, unnamed, renamed, changed, and just all over the place, just kept changing. And I'll talk about why this happened later on in the segment, but just keep that thought in there. Why has there been so many species of Styracosaurus, but the only proper, recognized one is Albertensis, which means from Alberta. So, the name Styracosaurus. Bit of a mouthful, but what does it mean? So, since most dinosaur names come from Greek or Latin, or the combination of both, that's where we'll start. So, styrax is the ancient Greek word for spike at the butt end of a spear shaft, and sauros, meaning lizard. Put those together, you get spiked lizard. So, spiked lizard is what Styracosaurus is called. Styracosaurus is also a ceratopsian, which is the family of Triceratops, Pachyrhinosaurus, Pachyrhinosaurus, Chasmosaurus, Centrosaurus, all these frilled, horned, and big bodies. So if you know the ceratopsian family, then you might know some of the superstars. But if you didn't, you might be surprised to know that there are over 70 different dinosaurs in this species, which is incredible. But the two, and I will vouch for this, the two superstars is Triceratops and Styracosaurus. Some ideas for why Styracosaurus is pretty big now is because we see it a lot featured in a lot like different media because it's close enough to Triceratops, but just different enough that it's kind of cool. Of course, Triceratops is the poster child for ceratopsians, but Styracosaurus is a good second place. So when you look at the family of ceratopsians, they're broken into two groups. We have the Centrosaurinae and the Chasmosaurinae. So they're named after Centrosaurus and Chasmosaurus, respectively. And major differences between these two groups are mostly in the skulls. So as you can see here, we have the Centrosaurinae. They are known for shorter, more rectangular frills, spines or spikes lining the frill, either above it or on the sides, and a developed or larger nasal bone or boss. So if we think what a boss is, Pachyrhinosaurus is one of the ones that has a boss, where instead of having like an actual horn, it's just a big chunk of like keratinous stuff. So as you can see, like it looks a lot different. All the same family as Styracosaurus, and then of course it's named after Centrosaurus, and you can see Centrosaurus in the bottom right. Now, our next family is the Chasmosaurinae. So they're known for longer frills, brow horns or varying sizes, and no spines or spikes lining the frills. And as you can kind of see here, Triceratops is kind of different. Well, they actually got kind of spines and spikes, but not like the crazy ones. Of course, you see Triceratops, Torosaurus, and Chasmosaurus. Triceratops is being like the number one. Torosaurus is also a big Canadian ceratopsian. You have Utah Ceratops, which is so cool, and then Regaliaceratops, which or Regaliaceratops, which looks so cool. So yeah, named after Chasmosaur because of course they look a lot different. So of these two families, Styracosaurus belongs to the Centrosaurinae line, and when you look at its skull, you can really see why it fits into this family. Now, this skull, what makes it so special? And that's always a good question. To start, the frill had anywhere between 4 to 6 parential spikes/spines along the upper part of the frill and running down the sides. So, look at a frill. As you can see there too, my path one. Lots of spikes. So here are the big ones, and then you got a bunch of small ones running down the side. Now, that's really special to Styracosaurus. And the really cool thing about that is, we don't really know why they have them, but we'll get to that in a second. So then they also have the large nasal horn protruding between its nose and its eyes. So from the nose bone and where the eyes are, right here. Nice big nose bone. And the horn, now this horn is incredible. So it could grow up to be 60 centimeters long. So you're looking at 2 feet. It's having a whole toddler on the end of your face. And it could be up to 15 centimeters or 6 inches wide, which is, that's 6 inches wide is crazy. That's huge. Now with that being said, before we even dive into what the frill could be used for, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, there's many differences between the Styracosaurus's and like the species. So, oh man, that was a good one. So at one point, and the number one reason for all the confusion of the Styracosaurus species is the frill. So in ceratopsians, the frill is usually uniform, which means all of the dinosaurs, oh, there he goes, and all the dinosaurs in that group, they're all going to look pretty close to each other. But it's a little different with Styracosaurus. There's a large amount of individualism or variation between the individuals. So some had more or less spikes or spines around the sides or the top of the frill. Others had bumps or knobs all over the frill. Some spikes and spines were slightly curved, some were thicker, some were thinner. It really just changed all over the board, and there was no uniformity. Like, of course, there's the frill. The frill doesn't really change, but everything about it could be very different just by the individual, which isn't... We don't really see that a lot. Like birds, yes, but only some birds. And birds are dinosaurs, just in case you didn't know. So looking at all these differences in the fact that this is all the same species, just one, this is Albertensis, you can really see why paleontologists had such a hard time kind of grasping these as just a single dinosaur species and not multiple. Now, what would the frill of Styracosaurus and the horn be used for? And it's widely contested over the years. If you've listened to my other episodes about ceratopsians, I'm going to feel like a broken record here, and I sound like a broken record. The ideas vary. We have defense, communication, to show that it has reached sexual maturity, intimidation, a heat sink / thermal regulation, and finally, an anchor for the jaw muscles. So, communication's a big one. If you have a bull, Styracosaurus with this vibrant crest frill, you have blood vessels running all through it. So one of the ideas is that if in times of stress or times of, like maybe it's adrenaline, they could flare their frills, or at least like force all the blood into their frills and maybe change the color. Kind of like what Styracosaurus might have done with its spines. That's one idea. The sexual maturity thing is really interesting too, because the frill would grow to a point. So once you reach that age where you're like, hey, now I can make babies, your frill would be set, and it would never change from there. It might get injured and such, and maybe droop at an older age, but for the most part, your frill's done growing. So that would be then it's basically putting a sticker on saying, I'm here to do that, and it would work. Intimidation, of course, is a big one. Intimidation. If you're gonna get charged by a large carnivorous dinosaur, and you could just like flash your frill and be like, hey, don't try me, it might spook it. Kind of like some birds that open up their feathers. I'm thinking kind of frilled lizards. Of course, it's not gonna go, but it would already be there. You just tilt your head down. Now, the heat sink and the thermoregulation thing is really cool. When you have this big solar panel on your head, first thing in the morning, you could probably just like put yourself in the sun's rays and it would warm you up faster. And of course, since the entire frill is just a covering of skin and blood vessels, that would heat the blood up, and then it'd be able to go through your body faster, and it would warm you up faster and then get you ready for the day. And the thermoregulations, if you have this big solar battery stuck to your face, as the day cools, this big piece of you in front of you is going to keep absorbing heat, and that way it's going to keep your blood warm, and it's going to keep you warmer for longer. And the last one, which I thought was really cool, is the anchor for jaw muscles. So you got these big jaw muscles, these big dental batteries, which are tons of teeth that help grind up plants, and a big beak. And you need to have strength to be able to chew through stuff. Well, if you have this big frill, it gives your muscles on your face the ability to stretch out longer and stick to these anchor points and give you more biting force, which is so cool to think of like a herbivore having a crazy bite force. Now, I want to touch on the defense as well, because the defense one is the one that I like to believe in the most. So for the defense claim, I find it really hard not to think of the classic image of a herd of Triceratopses in the middle, or in the circle, like this one. I think I actually have a book like this where you have just a wall of shields and spears. And if you were a hungry T-Rex, is that really worth it to try to get in there? You're going to lose an arm, you're going to lose an eye, you're going to lose your life. This gives the ability to keep the herd safe, kind of like what muskox do with wolves. This idea, while not like highly accepted, I like to believe in this. That's what I grew up with. Of course, things change, but that's what I think of. And Styracosaurus would be even worse, because you'd have just one saber, like one spear waiting, and that's 2 feet of keratinous horn that could just punch through you. Now, turning themselves into a shield and spear wall, Styracosaurus would have been able to deal with the pretty massive predators they had. Styracosaurus wasn't a big dinosaur by any means, but you had to put up with Gorgosaurus, which I've talked about, Daspletosaurus, which I've also talked about, and Albertosaurus. These are all 3 big tyrannosaurs that could just make a meal of a single Styracosaurus. But in a group like this, good luck. And now with that idea of the group, the shield wall would only work if Styracosaurus was actually a herd dinosaur. So now some paleontologists believe that yes, they were herd dinosaurs, while others don't really believe that and think they were probably more solitary. So, to my understanding, ceratopsians are known for being herd dinosaurs. There's been tons of bone beds of all these mass die-offs of ceratopsians. It pretty much shows for itself. Some people don't believe that. Now, these bone beds, you find a lot of fossilized Styracosauruses and, of course, other ceratopsians. But the 2 camps of what these bone beds represent are still out. So A, it could be a large herd was trying to cross a flooded river, and of course, the young, the sick, the elderly drown. And of course, the river washes them all downstream. Here's my body tumbling along, fall into a hole, and then all the ones that died and didn't get eaten by crocodiles are just dumped in this hole. And then over time, and everything gets pressed down and crushed down and crushed down, you have, 30, 40 Styracosaurus now smushed into a big bone bed. And how'd they get there? Another idea is that this hole where they all get smushed down isn't actually the end of a river. It's a watering hole. And around the watering hole, you have all these Styracosauruses. You have other dinosaurs that are all around this watering hole in, like, let's say a dry season. And they're all drinking the water. If they're all drinking the water, and it's a dry season, when the water runs out, there's no water. And if the water runs out, there's no dinosaurs. So the idea is that these dinosaurs sat around this watering hole over the course of a dry season, just sucking the water dry. And then when it was done, they'll just die to thirst, which I'm not a huge fan. It makes it seem really dumb. Elephants will go for miles and miles and miles to find water. Most African animals will find water somehow. If you're telling me that dinosaurs found a watering hole and we're like, we're going to sit here and we're going to drink it dry. And then it dried and they're like, well, I'm going to die of thirst. I think you can die of thirst in like a day, 2 days. I don't know I don't know how quickly it'd be for a bigger animal, but you would have time to find water. You would find it, or at least get out of the way and not just all die in one spot. So I assume the river formation thing makes more sense. And of course, I believe that these were a herd animal. So how big was it? And I'm happy you asked. So, dear viewer/listener, we have a picture of Styracosaurus compared to a human. And for once, this is not a very big dinosaur. I mean, that's a 5'6" person. Well, that one actually might be a little bit bigger than that. That's actually pretty much as tall as I am, funny enough. So, looks pretty big. And realistically, it is a big-ish dinosaur, but not comparatively. When first discovered, Styracosaurus was thought to be about 5.5 meters long, which is about 16 to 18 feet. And it stood up to be about 1.8 meters, or 5.9 feet at the hip. So really big thing here, as you can see from this picture, its back legs are a lot longer than its front legs. And that's why we measure from the hip. Some animals measure from the shoulder, like horses are from the shoulder. But with Styracosaurus, it had a sloped stance, or a slooped, whatever you want to say it, posture, making the back legs, or the back hips, taller than the front shoulders. So then we measure it from the hips. It could have also weighed anywhere between 1.8 to 2.7 metric tons, or about 2 to 3 short tons. Now, all this to say, it's a good-sized dinosaur, but also not the biggest. Again, Triceratops was a monster compared to this thing. So that puts it in a medium-sized ceratopsian category. Not a true giant, but certainly not small. So I found this website, and I'm a hater of this website. Natural History Museum is this website, and it drives me insane. So the way they write is almost like satirical. So they were slighting my favorite ceratopsia. They're making Styracosaurus sound bad. So this godforsaken website said the Styracosaurus was slow, hefty, and they might have well just said it sucked. Like whoever wrote this article did not like Styracosaurus. So I did some digging, get it? Paleontologist show, did some digging. And I found that its projected land speed would have been about, and this is based on fossilized footprints to see like how its stance would have been, and computer models showing how its body would have moved. And it's estimated that Styracosaurus could have had a top speed of 32 kilometers per hour, or about 20 miles per hour, which is not a slow dinosaur by any means. So to call this dinosaur hefty and slow, I'm not a big fan of this Natural History Museum. So if you go to this website, just take it with a grain of salt. And we're almost through it. So as a ceratopsian, Styracosaurus was a herbivore, meaning it only ate plants and other vegetation, and it had this parrot-like beak. And this parrot-like beak was so cool because it was basically like having a pair of shears on the end of your face, and then had dental batteries. And a dental battery is like hard-packed teeth that wear away and grow over time, and it's basically just like a big chunk of teeth at the back of your jaw that helps you to grind plant matter up easier. So this would have let it eat pretty much like a wide variety of plants. You have a pair of shears, your dental batteries, nothing's really stopping you. Except that it wasn't very tall. So Styracosaurus had this like funny slope to its head, its mouth, and its neck that wouldn't really have allowed Styracosaurus to actually like look up too much. When you have this big frill, you can't turn your head too much before the frill's touching your back. And if the frill's touching your back, you can't go any further. So it would have probably eaten mostly low-growing vegetation. Now, there's one idea that says since it had such like hefty shoulders, I said hefty, again, I'm not agreeing with this website, but shoulders that could have maybe pushed trees aside, or the horn could have been used to kind of like move things. There's not a ton of evidence to show this, but the idea is that it could just knock over trees and eat that. I don't see that happening. It's not it's not a huge dinosaur by any means. It's rhino-sized. Could rhinos push down a tree? Yes. I've never seen that happen, though, at least not from my experience. So I'm going to say probably just ate low-crop vegetation. And lastly, last but not least, let's talk about where you can find Styracosaurus. in the media, wherever you want to say. So to start, you may have seen one in The Land Before Time, which I didn't get a picture of. The Land Before Time, the movie is called The Cold Stone of Fire, which I'm pretty sure is a comet in 2000. Or maybe you even saw Disney's Dinosaur with Ema. And now Ema, I love that. I still have a toy of Ema. Ema is like this elderly Styracosaurus. She has Earl, which is like the little notosaur. It's like a dog. Just great. This old Styracosaurus, so cool. Now, if you missed these two films back in the great year 2000, don't worry, we have more options. You could have seen it in Dino King, which is an anime. You could have seen it in Dinosaur Train, which is like a kids show about trains and dinosaurs. Like really, you're hitting like the niche right there. And if you hadn't seen Styracosaurus in Jurassic World, that's okay. It was written in all of these movies and TV shows, but every time it's been supposed to be on scene, it's scrapped. They pick Sinoceratops, they pick something else. So Styracosaurus is blacklisted from Jurassic World for some strange reason. And finally, in the critically acclaimed The Good Dinosaur, you will see Styracosaurus in good old Forrest Woodbrush and his creepy little friends. So as you can see here, Forrest needs these friends to keep him safe. The one with the tusks is called Dream Eater, and he keeps his dreams realistic. It's just very strange. This one looks more like a Sinoceratops, realistically with the two brow horns, but it is supposedly a Styracosaurus. So that's, I wouldn't say the Good Dinosaur is, you know, your best bet for accuracy, but yeah, so that's that. So that has been all a Styracosaurus. I tried to keep it like fun, and I tried to get more images this time because I really like Styracosaurus. I was gonna get Path of Titans gameplay, but Styracosaurus is in a really bad place in Path of Titans. It doesn't have a lot of abilities, and it just gets bullied. So I have a lot of videos of me dying, but I didn't think I wanted to put that up to show how poor I am as a Styracosaurus. So we're just gonna pretend that didn't happen. And with that though, I'm happy you joined me today to watch Dino. My name's Eldin Atkin. We have been live from Media Hub on rightradio.ca, and I hope you have a great day. I'll be back sometime in the future. And with that, have a good one. See ya.